The Tina 2 3D printer by Weedo is a mini 3D printer that almost is a printer that I could recommend, but let me tell you my experience so far. Hey guys, it's Joe, and this is not the first 3D printer that I've used from Weedo. As you can tell behind me, I've got the Weedo F192. Now, my experience with this machine, just to remind you if you didn't watch the previous video where I compared it to the Ender 3, as this machine was very expensive and that one was very cheap, it was kind of rocky, I'll be honest. This machine I was a little bit excited about because it is a great-great-grandchild of the Replicator 1, the first 3D printer I ever had and used, and I ran into problems. They had somehow managed to lock this machine down so that you could only slice with their WeBuilder slicer, and I don't really like the WeBuilder slicer, at least not the version that it was. It just was too clunky trying to do something like a dual nozzle machine. It just wasn't suited for it, but I couldn't use any other slicer because they made some very interesting choices that locked you into that slicer. Even when I could make an X3G, which is their version of G-code, in another slicer, it didn't work. They had locked it down. And so that resulted in me kind of not using this 3D printer. It's just been sitting here in the background, and I'm afraid giving off a false impression that I'm using it a lot. I'm not. It's just sitting here gathering dust and holding my steamer pot up. But with the Tina 2, this came with an interesting recommendation. When I saw this 3D printer, I said, I've seen that one before. The Monoprice Cadet is this 3D printer, the exact same one. Monoprice doesn't make 3D printers. They don't sell 3D printers. They find other people who are making 3D printers, rebrand them for themselves, and sell them. And so far, they have chosen and resold my favorite 3D printers. Their Monoprice Select Mini is a repackaged Malayan. Malayan doesn't sell themselves, so everybody thought that that was just Monoprice, but it's not. Under the covers, it's made by a different manufacturer entirely. The Monoprice Voxel is just a FlashForge Adventure 3, and that is currently my #1 recommended 3D printer for everybody. So Monoprice has a good nose for 3D printers. They can see one and say, yes, that's a winner, let's back that one. And I really like that. So when I saw that they were backing this 3D printer, I thought, whew, I gotta get a hold of it. Now, my first impression of this printer when I unboxed it was that it is tiny. I mean, this is the smallest. It's practically handheld. I can put this thing entirely within the build volume of my JG Aurora A5S. It's just itty bitty. And the build volume for it is actually not much smaller. It's 100 by 110 centimeters cubed, which is standard for a mini 3D printer, the same as the Monoprice Select. But when I fired this thing up for the first time, turned it on, I noticed something that kind of surprised me. Instead of the standard Mighty Board startup tune, I saw a Baud Marlin interface. Now, if you don't know me, let me explain my opinion of a Baud Marlin interface. I love Marlin. I support Marlin development on Patreon. I think that Marlin is the baseline for what we should have, but whenever I see that user interface, especially from a company that has made great user interfaces on other machines, my heart kind of drops a little bit. A Baud Marlin interface is not something that you want to give to a new 3D printer user, in my opinion. It's clunky. It could use a little bit of teaching about UI design and UX, but alright, it's a Marlin interface. But then again, I got to thinking, does that mean that this 3D printer is hackable? If it's just running Marlin 2.0, well then I should be able to plug it into my computer and mess with it, and maybe even mess with Marlin. This could be the machine that I use to experiment with making changes to the Marlin user interface and showing people how I would like it to be done. And I'll be honest, That got me a little bit excited. But first, I needed to get some experience with the machine, just making sure that it works. Now, I noticed when I unboxed it, it has this little fold down lever on it for holding spools of filament, and it works for small spools of filament, but for larger spools of filament, you're going to need to have the right spool. If it's got a correct internal geometry, it'll hold on and won't slide off, but it like rolls on the floor, and you're just kind of rocking it back and forth on that peg. Now, you would think that that's a bad thing, but it's not really. I mean, this is exactly the sort of problem that you would use a 3D printer to solve, figuring out a way to extend this in some way so that it can hold larger rolls of filament, maybe even at an angle so that they feed in properly. That's the perfect problem to solve with a 3D printer, and the perfect first problem to solve with a 3D printer. I kind of approve of 3D printers, especially very cheap ones that have these sort of built-in problems that you have to solve, so I'm not upset at this hook being difficult to use a large spool of filament on. I suspect that if other people pick up this machine and run, that will be one of the first prints that we see available on Thingiverse, or whatever is going to replace Thingiverse when it finally gives up the ghost. Now, on the SD card, a micro SD card, mini 3D printer, and it is actually really easy to get at that micro SD card. On that micro SD card, there are a ton of test 3D prints. So, you know what? I just decided to run them all off and see what they were. And hey, look at that. Now I know what Zunlu is. It's a reindeer. It's one of these hinged reindeer. The prints mostly went well. I found it interesting that the gear hearts that they had on there had been sliced upside down of the way that it should be sliced. It's supposed to be sliced with these gears down so that everything touches the build plate and works out, and the top here is bridging, but it put that on the bottom so that the gears were kind of floating, and it caused some bad stringiness on the back. But that's a slice, and it's a weird choice to do it. I don't know why they did it, but they did it, and it still worked. It succeeded. We've got a bonefish. The wing of the butterfly broke, but otherwise everything turned out fantastic. You know, the one thing about test prints on an SD card, though, is it lacks attribution. Who made these files? Well, I know who made some of these files because they're famous, but even so, like, it bugs me that we can't put attribution on a G-code file, but oh well, there you go. I want to talk for a second about the list of features that are displayed on the front of this 3D printer to kind of advertise it. They say that one of their main features is WeBuilder. Unless WeBuilder has changed a lot since I last used it, that's not a selling point for me. It also says that they use biodegradable filament, just like every other 3D printer does. Now, I noticed when I was doing the test prints about their removable magnetic build plate. I thought it was interesting that this comes off the build plate really, really easily, and I thought, man, that just doesn't have much stick. It's a weak magnet. But then when I put it down there, I noticed that what I was concerned about was that it would wiggle sideways, that a print would catch and slide, and yet I haven't seen that problem in all the prints that I did, and I noticed that it pulls up a lot easier than it wiggles side to side. I don't know how they did that, but thumbs up for that magnetic build plate. It's on there really, really well. Auto leveling, it says. Auto leveling? Does this thing have auto leveling? Oh, doggone it. You know, if you look past the guard on front, you can see, yeah, it's got a little inductive, conductive, what is that sensor that can sense the metal? It's interesting because I didn't have to calibrate that, and yet it just works, which is kind of neat to do underneath a magnet. So, wow, I hope that never goes out of calibration, but there it is. It has auto leveling. It says that it has one-click filament in, and for me, what that turned out being is that they had modified Marlin to have a menu option that runs a little script, and that script will heat up your filament and load it and tell you what to do, which is really, really neat. But there is no script for unloading or changing the filament, which, what's going to happen when a new user gets this and they see that option and they use it, and then they want to change filament and it just loads on top of filament that's already in there? That could be bad. But, you know, it's Marlin. We should be able to fix it, right? So let's look to the future and hope that we can make it a little bit better with a future update. The last feature it's advertising on here is Wi-Fi, and that was the very next thing that I wanted to try out. So I went to the Wi-Fi menu on there, and it gave you a set of instructions that you need to follow. Those instructions are to get your phone, go to the App Store, and download the Polo Print app. But oddly enough, there is no Polo Print app for Weedo. There's only a Polo Print app for Monoprice. Now, like I said, this is the same printer, as far as I understand, as the Monoprice Cadet. So the app should work for the Monoprice Cadet, and sure enough, it's on there. However, getting it to connect to the Wi-Fi was, well, it was kind of tricky. You enter your Wi-Fi credentials, and then you tell it to find the printer and hook it up. But since the printer isn't connected on my Wi-Fi, what's this thing broadcasting? Is it just sending out my Wi-Fi password and saying, hey, anybody who wants to connect to this, listen up, here it is? From a security standpoint, I'm a little bit wary of that. But, you know, no, that didn't work. Well, hold on. Let's try it one more time. Okay, maybe I need to turn it off and back on again? Okay, that time it connected, and there it goes. My printer has a IP address. Fantastic, I'm on the network. Let's get printing. The prints that it shows are cloud prints or print from the SD card. Well, that's interesting. So I can load up a print on my SD card, then load up my app, walk across the room, and start the print. Or I could just start the print when I stick in the SD card. It kind of seems interesting to me that I can't just take anything that I want, that I've got these list of, once again, non-attributed 3D print files, but hey, I know where most of these come from. Still, it's an interesting application of Wi-Fi, but unfortunately, not one that I find useful. The WeBuilder app actually does have a Wi-Fi Connect on it, but it doesn't connect to this printer's Wi-Fi. So all in all, while it theoretically has Wi-Fi, it functionally doesn't do anything with it that's any good. However, it does have the capability. So again, that's just a problem that could be solved in software in the future, and maybe it will be. So now it's time to try to make my own 3D print files. No more of these test prints. We're going to go ahead and load up my own files. Now, like I said in the past, WeBuilder was not my first choice of slicers, but I decided to give it a try. And you know, when you're only working with a single nozzle, it works pretty good and does a pretty good job of things. And of course, the first thing that I print was some Lego models. Now, these models don't hold on to each other very well. I think that the filament that I was using is a little bit too thin and perhaps under extruding, and I didn't calibrate my feed rate properly, so I'm going to blame it on that. But when I tried to connect them to real Legos, they were very, very tight in weird ways. I managed to get them to snap on, sometimes not really, kind of, which to me says that there's some scaling off. But hey, Bear Marlin, I should be able to go in there and calibrate these movement steps and make it work like that. However, before I did that, it also said in the spec sheet for this that we can slice with Cura, and I would be very excited if I could. And sure enough, on the SD card came a copy of Cura 3.3, which fortunately actually is not that old, and assuming that they didn't do any funny business like they did in the past, that I should be able to take the settings from Cura and copy them over to the newest version of Cura, including the start and end G-codes, and I should be able to make it work. Well, it didn't work. Not at first, and I'm not quite sure what went wrong at this point. I thought, again, I had some experience with them. I thought maybe they had put some code in the G-code that says if you don't see this, then it doesn't come from our version of Cura, therefore don't use it, or something. I didn't know that Cura 3.3 could be hacked like that. So I did a test. I made a tiny print, just a 1mm cube, and I sliced it in their version of Cura, and then I sliced it in my newly formatted, with all the settings moved over, version of Cura for the latest version of Cura. And then I did a diff on those two G-codes. Oh, did you know G-codes, they're just text files. You can just look at them line by line and see what the difference is. And I saw a very interesting difference between them. The line that is supposed to preheat the nozzle and get it up to heat didn't translate in the newest version of Cura. And when I looked at the start G-code, it had a very interesting line in there about replace this data. So I looked at other start G-codes in other printers, and I noticed that they too had a similar line, but a different way of communicating to Cura to insert the value of whatever nozzle temp you have there. So I updated that line to the newest version of Cura, and all of a sudden the newest version of Cura worked great. If you would like a copy of the start and end G-codes for this printer, go to the comment section. The first comment there will be a pinned one to my blog, and I will put the paste of the start and end G-codes for this printer, as well as all the other settings that you'd need if you want to use this in the latest version of Cura. So with Cura finally configured, I printed out a couple of Legos, and they were identical. In fact, this whole time I can't tell you which one of these sets I did in WeBuilder and which one I did in Cura. They're identical. They work fine, both of them. So there we go. I'm pretty happy. I've got Cura configured. I can slice anything that I want. Very next thing to slice is some printer blocks. And wow, these printer blocks actually, these hold on. They're much easier to put together and take apart than some of my other ones. That might just be a function of my under extruding filament, but I wonder how the pivot blocks will work. These ones require a very tight, even the top and the bottom of these things work better. Wow, okay, let's try the pivot block. Yeah, that's way under extruding. Okay, but I have to say that these are some of the best printer blocks I've ever seen. The nubs on them are working on all sides, top and bottom, and it really got me thinking that maybe we don't need a heated build plate. Now, I forgot to mention before now, this doesn't have a heated build plate, but I'm starting to wonder if a heated build plate is actually bad for PLA. These are fantastic printer blocks. But like I said, there was something off with the Legos, so I pulled out the calipers and started to measure, and I noticed that it was dead on in the X but off in the Y, or it was dead on in the Y but off in the X. Obviously there was some steps per millimeter that I needed to correct on this machine somewhere, somehow. That's okay, it's Marlin, right? Let's just grab my computer and the USB cable and let's plug them in and see what we can do here. Alrighty, so the first thing I need to do is pull up a program for, you know, connecting to it, a console program. There are many options. I have a copy of Simplify 3D, which I've had for years, which is the one that helped me get the X3Gs for this, and it's the only one that works for here. I don't know if I can recommend it in any other case, but it's got a great interface program on it, so let's fire that up. And let's play with the baud rate and see if we can get this thing to connect. Nope, nothing but garbage. 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 Huh. Simplify 3D won't connect at all. You know, the Arduino IDE also has a console, and for most of these machines, you could just connect with the Arduino IDE. Let's see if that has any more luck. Well, let's see. Yeah, baud rate, no. Oh, hold on. I'm starting to get something. At 1 million baud? Well, that's different. I've never seen a machine that you need to crank the baud rate up to that height, and even then it's still coming out just a little bit garbage. I'm not 100% sure what's going on here. I wonder if Rapidity or Host would work. Nope, it's not going to work. There's always Pronterface. Alright, Pronterface will allow me to type in the baud rate, so I can play with it and fiddle with it and see if I can figure out exactly. Let's try the 1 million. Yeah, it seems to be working. Okay, well, I'm in, at least. Let's run the M501 and find out what the settings are, and that's weird. M501 says that it's fetching the data, but it won't echo it out. It doesn't show it. Every other 3D printer, when you send it that command, will show you that information, and yet this one, it's not. Maybe it's just pronterface. Let me go back to the Arduino command line. No, same thing, just more garbled. Oh no, it's locked down. They've made a version of Marlin that you can't hack, not directly. So here's the situation that we're in. It might be possible to take a fresh version of Marlin, write config files for it that will work with this printer. Those config files haven't been written yet, so I would have to write them from scratch, and I've never done that before. But it might be possible that if I do that, I can upload it. I'll have to be careful to make sure that the auto level works in there as well, and then I will have a fresh version of Marlin. I don't know if the Wi-Fi capabilities will come through, because I don't know if Marlin has Wi-Fi capabilities, and maybe they wrote those themselves. Then again, the Wi-Fi on this isn't really that useful, so maybe I should go ahead and do that. But the problem is, I just don't have time right now for that. Listen, I don't mean to pull the I'm busy card, but right now, I got things that I need to 3D print. I don't have time to be playing with Marlin on stuff like this. So while I might mess with this in the future, and while it's possible that somebody else will mess with this, if it is possible to do that, then would that make this a recommendable 3D printer? Well, maybe. I said at the beginning that I like 3D printers that have little problems that you need to solve. Not like blocking problems that prevent you from printing before you can solve them, but little things that you can do to make it better. And the idea of a 3D printer that works fine at the beginning, but that you can hack to make better later on, is to me very appealing. And so if that is this printer, then yeah, I could recommend this, because you hand this to a kid who's never done 3D printing, they'll have some good experiences with it, but then they'll want to do something that they can't do, and they'll hack it and make it work. But the fact that Weedo has made modifications to the Marlin firmware that they haven't released, that's not good. I recognize that a lot of companies have this mentality that they need to control things, and so if they make modifications, they think that they own those modifications. But with open source software, the only reason you got it was because you agreed to the license that if you made any changes, you would share those changes. And they're just not doing that, and that's not good. So will they change that? Well, I've emailed Weedo, I've emailed my contacts, and I've said, hey, listen, you guys aren't obeying open source, you need to do this. And if they do that, if they make the choice and say, fine, we'll release our source so that everybody can do it, then this machine would go from, I can't really recommend it because right now it's an inaccurate, very small 3D printer that you can't do much with, to a machine that you can hack and make better. Yes, I could absolutely recommend this if Weedo respects open source and lets us have the source for it. That is seriously the only thing stopping me from recommending this printer, because without that, I can't fix this printer. I can't calibrate this printer. I can't make it print accurately because they've locked it down, so I can't do that. So there we go, the Weedo Tina 2, a 3D printer that is so close to being one that I can recommend, that, and it could be recommendable if that changes in the future. I will alter the description of this video so that it says in big letters that yes, I recommend this 3D printer. So keep an eye on the description. I'll let you know if that happens in the future. Before we go, check out this cool project on the What You Making channel on my Discord. Why don't you stop by and check out what other cool projects are there? And hey, if you share something you've done, maybe you'll see it in a future video too. Thank you very much for watching. Hey, if I mentioned anything in this video, you'll find a link to it in the cards, and you should check that out. Did you know that I'm social? I've got links to all the socials, and you should stop by and say hi. I really kind of enjoy it when that happens. Big thanks go out to my direct backers, and if you want to know more about how you can become that, there'll be a link right here that you can check out. And as always, I want to remind you, safety first, because I care about you. And I'll see you next time. Oh, that's interesting. Classic one there.